At 77, Mel Blount no longer speaks with the fire of the shutdown corner who once terrified an entire league. His voice is calmer now, weathered by decades of silence, triumph, and unspoken truths. Yet behind that calm surface lives a man who carried battles far greater than any route he defended. Battles against players who tried to break him, against coaches who tried to reshape him, and against a league that eventually rewrote its rulebook because of him. Few men in NFL history were so dominant that the sport itself had to change to survive them. Fewer still paid the emotional cost of that dominance the way Blount did. Tonight, he finally reveals the 6 hidden truths that shaped his life in ways the cameras never captured. Truths about rivals whose names he never spoke in public. Truths about decisions the league made that cut deeper than any collision on the field. Truths about fear, resentment, and power that followed him long after the cheers faded. Each truth exposes a layer of Mel Blount that fans never saw, because the legend of the steel curtain always seemed larger than the man within it. Why did the most feared corner of the 70s carry such private wounds? Why did certain rivalries never heal? And what were the moments that truly defined him behind the myth of invincibility? Those answers begin now. Mel Blount entered the National Football League like a storm carving its path across the plains. Born in rural Georgia and shaped by a childhood defined by discipline, faith, and the unforgiving realities of the American South, he arrived in Pittsburgh with a frame and presence that seemed almost unreal for a cornerback. At 6'3", with long strides, powerful hands, and a staring intensity that unsettled receivers. Before the ball was even snapped, he stood as the embodiment of the steel curtain mindset. Pittsburgh did not simply defend. Pittsburgh imposed its will. And Mel Blount became the standard for imposing will on the outside. Throughout the 70s, he redefined what a cornerback could be. Where others reacted, he dictated. Where others shadowed, he smothered. Quarterbacks avoided his side entirely. Receivers entered games knowing that every route was a collision waiting to happen. His style was not built on finesse. It was built on strength, intimidation, and a refusal to allow space. Football in that era rewarded men who could dominate another man face to face, and no one did that more completely than Blount. Yet dominance comes with consequences. Behind the trophies and accolades, there existed a private tension between the man and the league he controlled. His physicality sparked controversy. His ability to erase receivers forced the NFL to step in. The league introduced stricter passing rules that effectively ended the era of pure bump and run coverage. Those rules became known across football as the Mel Blount rule, a label that felt both flattering and wounding to the man whose name it carried. It signaled that the league respected his greatness, but also feared the game would suffocate under the weight of his dominance. There are few honors more revealing than having the sport itself changed because of you, but there are few burdens heavier. Off the field, Blount was disciplined, private, and intensely proud. He carried a quiet resentment toward how his style had been framed as too brutal, when in truth, the game had celebrated brutality for generations. He watched as the spotlight shifted toward a league eager to modernize its image while distancing itself from the very players who built its mythology. Those contradictions shaped the foundation of the truths he would later reveal. The rivalries, the betrayals, and the moments of deep conflict were not isolated stories. They were reflections of a league trying to change and a man determined to remain himself. This is the world from which the hidden truths of Mel Blount emerge. A world of fearsome matchups, unspoken grudges, and a career that forced the sport into evolution. Before he reveals the 5 men who shaped his battles and the one bonus figure he never expected to confront, we must step into the countdown that exposes everything the public never saw. Lynn Swann entered Pittsburgh with the grace of a ballet performer and the confidence of a man who believed he was born for the spotlight. His routes were elegant, his catches defied physics, and his presence added a polish to the steel curtain dynasty that complemented its raw power. To the world, he and Mel Blount were simply two pillars of the same empire, two legends wearing the same uniform and chasing the same banners. But beneath the shared glory, there was a quiet friction, a clash not of enemies, but of men shaped by entirely different understandings of the game's identity. The tension began with contrasting philosophies. Swan represented finesse artistry and a league that wanted to showcase style. Blount represented force, intimidation, and the primal roots of football. Their worlds collided in practice more violently than fans ever knew. Swan often felt Blount's coverage crossed the line from competitive to punishing. Blount felt Swan sought special treatment and protection that contradicted the toughness Pittsburgh demanded. When the league tightened passing rules in ways that benefited receivers, Swan became a symbol of the direction Blount resented. Their friction was never personal in the traditional sense. It was ideological. It was about what football should be. The moment that crystallized their conflict came during a mid-70s practice session that lives only in the memories of those who witnessed it. Reporters had left. Cameras were gone. Only teammates remained to watch one of the most intense one-on-one battles in franchise history. Swan lined up wide, determined to prove that grace could withstand force. Blount closed the distance with a stare that carried the weight of every hit, every criticism, and every reminder that the game was built on contact. At the snap, Swan tried to slip past, but Blount struck him with a jam so powerful it knocked both men off balance. Swan rose, furious, feeling targeted. Blount stood unmoved, convinced he had simply played the game the way it was meant to be played. Their teammates intervened, not out of fear that a fight would break out, but because the emotional temperature had risen to a point where the team itself felt the strain. That practice became an unspoken legend. It summarized the divide between finesse and force, between artistry and domination, between the evolution of the league and the men who kept it grounded in its origins. In the years that followed, Swan and Blount remained respectful in public, but the silent distance never closed completely. Blount carried a cold truth about their relationship. He believed Swan wanted the game softened while he wanted it preserved. He never voiced resentment. He never sought reconciliation. But he never forgot that moment in practice when two visions of football collided and exposed a fault line within their dynasty. Cold truth. In Mel Blount's mind, Lynn Swan stood not as an enemy, but as a reminder of what the league was becoming and of how far it had shifted away from the world that made him who he was. Cliff Branch was the terror of the deep ball, a blur in silver and black who stretched defenses in ways few receivers of his era could match. He played with a swagger that matched the identity of the Raiders, a team built on rebellion and defiance. To most cornerbacks, Branch was an unsolvable problem. To Mel Blount, he was a challenge that demanded absolute dominance. Their clashes became legendary long before fans understood that each snap between them carried the weight of pride, identity, and two franchises that refused to bow to each other. Branch represented speed. Blount represented control. Together they created collisions the league still talks about. The source of their friction stemmed from both style and stakes. The Raiders believed their vertical attack exposed weaknesses in Pittsburgh's secondary, and Branch became their spearhead. Branch felt Blount held endlessly, pushing physicality far beyond the rulebook. Blount felt Branch expected exceptions because of his speed and profile. The animosity grew each time they faced off, fueled by playoff battles where every yard mattered. When the league introduced stricter passing rules late in the decade, the Raiders celebrated the shift. Branch became one of the loudest voices praising the crackdown on contact. Blount viewed that celebration as a personal shot and a confirmation that Branch wanted to neutralize him rather than beat him. Their defining moment arrived during the heated playoff clash that would become the turning point of their rivalry. Pittsburgh and Oakland carried mutual hatred into every postseason meeting, but on that cold afternoon, the temperature between Branch and Blount rose higher than ever. Early in the game, Branch attempted to sprint past Blount on a go route. confident the tightened rules would force Blount to play softer. Instead, Blount met him with a perfectly timed jam that folded the route before it began. The collision echoed across the stadium and sent Branch stumbling toward the sideline. Anger flashed in his eyes as he insisted to officials that Blount had crossed the line again. Blount remained expressionless, offering neither explanation nor apology. The moment spiraled further when on the next drive, Branch lined up tight and whispered something only Blount could hear. Blount stepped forward and shut him down again. The Raiders' sideline erupted. Pittsburgh's sideline erupted in response. The officials struggled to maintain control. For 2 snaps, the entire emotional battlefield of the 70s distilled into a single matchup. Force against speed. Will against defiance. Pride against pride. Blount won the battle that day, but the bitterness lingered in Branch's eyes long after the game ended. That playoff clash became the heart of their rivalry. It was not merely a moment, it was a declaration of who would control the game. In later years, Blount rarely spoke publicly about Branch, but privately he carried a cold truth. Branch never accepted Blount's style or dominance, and Blount never forgot the feeling that Branch wanted the league to legislate him out of existence. It was a rivalry born from opposite visions of football and sustained by playoff battles that shaped an era. Cold truth. To Mel Blount, Cliff Branch was not just a dangerous receiver. He was the living symbol of a team that wanted to break him and a league that eventually tried to tame him. Ken Stabler played the game the way only a true Raider could. Calm eyes, loose shoulders, and the uncanny ability to carve defenses with a mixture of instinct and defiance. He was the quarterback who thrived in chaos, who welcomed pressure, who believed no rule, and no opponent could dictate the story except him. Across the field stood Mel Blount, a man who embodied structured discipline and controlled violence. Their rivalry became one of the most magnetic duels of the 70s. It paired the freewheeling gunslinger against the most suffocating corner of the era, and it simmered with tension from their very first meeting. The friction ignited from contrasting identities. Stabler believed that defenses feared Oakland and feared him most when he extended plays. Blount believed that receivers had no right to dictate anything at all once he put his hands on them. Whenever Branch Biletnikoff or Casper struggled to break free, Stabler's frustration turned toward Blount. He accused him of mugging receivers. Blount saw it as Stabler demanding leniency because his timing collapsed under physical pressure. Their battles escalated every postseason where the stakes felt biblical. Each side felt robbed in games decided by inches and interpretations. For Stabler, the league tightening the passing rules felt overdue. For Blount, it felt like an attack on the very foundation of the Steel Curtain. Their defining moment came during the iconic playoff showdown, later known for its violence and emotional volatility. Early in the second quarter, Stabler attempted to target Cliff Branch on a deep corner route. Blount jammed Branch with such precision and force that the route disintegrated. Stabler, believing Branch had been manhandled immediately, turned toward the officials in protest. The officials remained silent. On the next play, Stabler dropped back and scanned for another target. Blount baited him by giving a sliver of separation before exploding under the route and nearly intercepting the pass. The deflection sent the ball spiraling into confusion, and bodies collided at full speed. Stabler rose, furious, feeling Blount's presence disrupting not just his receivers, but his rhythm, his strategy, and his patience. After the play, Stabler approached Blount and muttered something sharp enough that nearby players stepped in. The moment revealed the emotional core of their rivalry. It was not simply physical, it was psychological. Blount had crawled inside Stabler's timing. Stabler wanted the rules to push him back out. The tension spilled into every matchup afterward. Stabler believed Blount exploited the blurred edges of the rulebook. Blount believed Stabler's complaints symbolized a league trying to protect offenses at the expense of defensive identity. Even years after Stabler left Oakland, the old tension remained heavy in Blount's memory. Cold truth. Stabler never forgave Blount for dictating the terms of their rivalry. And Blount never forgot that Stabler wanted officials and rule changes to decide battles he believed should be settled by men on the field. Roger Staubach entered every game with a calm intensity that felt almost military in precision. He was the face of the Dallas Cowboys during an era when the team embodied glamour control and a polished brand of winning. Staubach represented efficiency and poise. Blount represented disruption and force. When their paths crossed, the clashes felt inevitable because they symbolized more than two elite competitors. They represented two opposing visions of football. One side wanted rhythm and timing. The other wanted to dismantle rhythm before it began. Staubach and Blount became adversaries in a duel shaped by contrast and fueled by mutual determination. The friction began with what Staubach valued most: timing. His system relied on crisp routes and precise release points. Blount's approach shattered that concept. His jams did not simply delay plays, they erased them. Dallas receivers often failed to break free in time for Staubach's quick triggers, leading him to believe Blount was pushing the boundaries of legality. Blount believed Dallas expected a level of protection that did not exist in the brutal reality of 70s football. The rivalry intensified during high-stakes matchups where pressure mounted and every incomplete pass felt personal to Staubach. With each confrontation, the tension grew. Their defining moment arrived during the epic clash between the Steelers and Cowboys in a championship setting that carried the weight of history. Early in the game, Staubach tried to exploit a mismatch by targeting Drew Pearson on a timing route. Blount disrupted the play with a jam so powerful that Pearson staggered. Staubach released the ball before recognizing the destruction of the route. The pass sailed harmlessly into the turf, and Staubach's frustration became visible. On the next drive, Staubach attempted to spread the field with a series of short passes designed to neutralize Blount's physicality. Blount read the intention instantly. He stepped into the throwing lane and nearly intercepted the pass, forcing a turnover scare that sent shockwaves across the stadium. The tension escalated later when Staubach attempted a deep strike. As Pearson fought for separation, Blount's hand disrupted the catch at the last second. Staubach stared him down, feeling the weight of a defender who refused to respect rhythm or timing. Blount remained calm, knowing he had once again dictated the terms of engagement. The Cowboys' sideline urged officials to intervene. The Steelers' sideline responded with pride. For a moment, the entire stadium felt the collision of philosophy. Staubach wanted clarity. Blount wanted chaos. That championship battle carved the rivalry into NFL history. In the years that followed, Staubach maintained public respect for Blount, but internally he never forgot how disruptive the cornerback had been to his system. To him, Blount represented an obstacle that forced the Cowboys to abandon their identity. Cold truth. Staubach believed Blount bent the game away from fairness. Blount believed Staubach wanted the game softened to preserve timing. Neither man changed his view. Their rivalry lived on long after both walked away from the field. Pete Rozelle was not a receiver or a quarterback or a man Blount could overpower at the line. He was the commissioner who shaped modern football, the architect of parody image and entertainment. Where Blount ruled the field with physical dominance, Rozelle ruled the league with polished authority. Their conflict was unlike the others because it did not play out through tackles or contested catches. It unfolded through rulebook's boardrooms and the shifting identity of a sport caught between brutality and mass appeal. Of all the figures who shaped Blount's journey, Rozelle left the deepest and most complicated mark. Their tension began with philosophy. Rozelle wanted a league defined by offense highlight plays and television-friendly excitement. Blount represented the old world, a version of football built on contact intimidation and the raw struggle between men. As Blount's dominance grew, Rozelle and the Rules Committee grew concerned that the balance of the sport was tipping too far toward suffocating defense. Complaints from teams echoed through league offices. Games slowed. Passing attacks crumbled. The steel curtain became an impenetrable fortress, and Blount was its gatekeeper. Roselle believed the game had to open up. Blount believed the game was exactly what it should be. The defining moment came in the late 70s when the league introduced new regulations to limit contact beyond 5 yards downfield. The rule was intended to modernize the sport, but its true meaning was unmistakable. It was a direct response to Blount's dominance, a structural attempt to neutralize the physicality that had made him legendary. Blount's reaction was silent but volcanic. He felt targeted, not as a player, but as a symbol of a style the league no longer wanted. In a pivotal meeting with players during that offseason, he listened as analysts and executives explained why the passing game needed more freedom. None of them said his name, but every sentence felt pointed in his direction. That moment changed him. He understood he was not simply battling receivers. He was battling the evolution of the sport itself. When the new rule debuted, the impact was immediate. Receivers gained leverage. Defensive backs were forced to relearn their craft. Analysts praised the modernization of the game, and fans celebrated the rise of high-scoring offenses. But inside Blount, a quiet resentment grew. He continued to perform at an elite level, but he never forgot that the league had reshaped itself to contain him. It was a strange form of immortality. To be so dominant that the game rewrote its laws to survive you. Yet it also carried the sting of knowing that history would always frame the change as necessary. Cold truth. Pete Rozelle never saw Mel Blount as an enemy. He saw him as an obstacle to the entertainment era he envisioned. But to Blount, the commissioner became the one figure he could never confront on the field. The one man who altered his legacy without ever lining up across from him. A rivalry of eras rather than individuals, and one Blount carried long after he retired. John Stallworth was the quiet star of the Steelers dynasty. The counterbalance to Swan's elegance, and a receiver whose discipline rivaled the precision of a surgeon. He was steady, reliable, and unflappable, a man whose confidence never needed theatrics. To the world, he and Mel Blount were brothers in the same empire. But like many men forged in pressure and expectation, their connection carried silent edges. Stallworth respected Blount, but he also absorbed the full brunt of Blount's practice intensity, and those battles shaped a hidden rivalry that never reached the public eye. The tension between them emerged from contrasting temperaments. Stallworth relied on timing technique and calculated movement. Blount relied on physicality disruption and dictating the rhythm. In practice, Stallworth found himself facing the most dominant corner in the league, not as an opponent across enemy lines, but as a teammate who attacked every rep as if a championship depended on it. There were days when the collisions felt personal, when Stallworth wondered if Blount pushed him harder than others, when pride sparked beneath the professionalism. Their most telling moment came during a practice leading to a major playoff run. Stallworth attempted a sharp inside release. Blount jammed him with staggering force, halting the route and sending frustration through Stallworth's usually calm demeanor. Stallworth rose and confronted Blount with a rare flash of anger. Blount stared back without apology. The teammates nearby froze as the air thickened with unspoken emotion. Both men walked away, but something shifted. Stallworth understood that Blount's intensity was not aimed at him. It was aimed at the standard they all had to meet. Cold truth. Stallworth later admitted that no corner ever pushed him harder than Blount. But Blount never forgot that even among teammates, respect was forged in conflict. The story of Mel Blount is not the story of a man who simply mastered his craft. It is the story of a man who forced the sport itself to reckon with power, identity, and the boundaries of control. Through every rivalry and every collision he left marks that stretched far beyond the field. The conflicts he carried shaped not only who he became, but what the NFL became in response to him. As the years passed, he realized that each man he clashed with represented a different force, pulling the game in a new direction. Those forces collided within him long before they reshaped the league around him. Lynn Swann represented the rise of finesse. The elegant receiver who wanted space freedom and artistry stood across from a cornerback built on restricting all three. Their friction captured the growing divide between eras. Football was shifting toward spectacle, and Swann embraced that shift with confidence. Blount never tried to stop the change, but he never surrendered his belief that greatness came from struggle. When he looked back, he understood that Swann had not been an enemy. He had been a mirror, showing Blount exactly what part of the sport he was protecting. Cliff Branch embodied defiance. He carried the rebellious identity of the Raiders, a team determined to challenge both opponents and the league itself. Branch wanted to stretch the field and prove that speed could outrun power. Blount knew that if he broke Branch, he broke the Raiders' identity. Their clashes were not isolated battles. They were statements. Each hit became a symbol of who would dictate the tempo of the era. In the quiet years that followed, Blount admitted to himself that Branch pushed him to heights he could not have reached otherwise. Ken Stabler was the free spirit who exposed the psychological tension inside Blount's dominance. Stabler saw football as creativity under pressure. Blount saw football as control under chaos. Their rivalry became a duel of philosophies. Stabler's frustration grew when his precision disintegrated under Blount's presence. Blount carried the memory of those clashes as lessons in mental warfare. He learned that shutting down a route was only half the battle. Shutting down a quarterback's confidence was the true victory. Roger Staubach stood on the other end of that emotional spectrum. Where Stabler was loose, Staubach was calculated. He brought discipline and order to every snap and relied on timing crafted through repetition. Blount attacked that timing with precision. Their battles in championship games showed the world that defensive mastery could unravel even the most polished systems. When he looked back, Blount felt a respect for Staubach deeper than he expected. Staubach never quit. He never backed down. He forced Blount to sharpen his technique beyond raw power. Then came Pete Rozelle, the one man in Blount's story who never lined up across from him, yet confronted him more directly than any receiver or quarterback ever could. Rozelle represented the evolution of the sport, the shift toward entertainment offense and mass appeal. In many ways, he represented the future. Blount represented the past. Their conflict was the conflict of the league itself. When the rule change arrived, Blount understood that he had become larger than his own career. The league did not adjust to stop him. It adjusted to accelerate a new age. The realization struck him with equal weight and pride. He had shaped football in a way no cornerback ever had. Even Stallworth, the quiet warrior in the shadows of the dynasty, served as a reminder that steel sharpens steel. Their practice battles forged not resentment, but unspoken respect. When teammates collide with that level of intensity, they learn how much of their greatness is built on the pressure they place on each other. Blount carried that truth long after he left the field. And when he reflects on the hidden truths that defined his journey, he sees the pattern clearly. Every rivalry shaped a different part of him. Every clash ripped away a layer of the myth and exposed the man beneath. He was not simply the fearsome cornerback who punished receivers. He was a guardian of an era, a witness to its transformation, and a symbol of the uncomfortable truth that greatness always demands a price. The game changed around him because it had no other choice. His presence had become too powerful and too defining for the sport to ignore. Blount looks back now with a calm acceptance. The rivalries no longer sting. The tension no longer burns. The truths he carried for decades now feel like chapters in a larger story. A story of a man who forced football to evolve, who stood firm in a time of upheaval, and whose legacy reaches beyond statistics or trophies. In the end, he understands that his legend is not built solely on dominance. It is built on the conflicts that shaped him, the battles that defined an era, and the truth that change is inevitable, even for giants. The story of Mel Blount is more than a journey through rivalry and defiance. It is a reminder that the legends who shaped football's greatest era carried battles far deeper than the ones captured on film. His 6 hidden truths reveal a man who confronted teammates' opponents and even the league itself with unshakable resolve. They expose not only the pressures he faced, but the standards he set standards so high that the game had to reinvent itself to keep pace. Blount's legacy stands today as a testament to the rare power of an athlete whose impact reached beyond statistics and forced the sport to evolve. As you reflect on the rivalries that defined him, one question remains. Which of these 6 truths revealed the most about who he really was? Was it the clashes with receivers who tried to outrun him, the quarterbacks who questioned his physical dominance, or the commissioner who rewrote the rulebook in response to his power? Each viewer will see a different meaning in his journey because each rivalry touched a different part of the game's soul. If you found yourself drawn into the hidden layers behind Mel Blount's legend, then you already understand why the stories of football's golden age deserve to be retold. They are raw, human, and filled with the kind of truth that only emerges decades later. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden truths, make sure you subscribe to NFL Hidden Truths for more untold stories of the men who shaped the game from 1960 to 1990. Like the video, share your thoughts, and join a community that keeps the real history of football alive.